My name is Shiva. Full name is Shiva Kumar Viswanathan, and this is an extremely critical piece for whatever we have done. The entire idea of how we use technology and how we got to ready ourselves to understand users is largely what we spoke about. Today's stuff is the basis where we actually look at the entire stack. It kind of originates some of the questions that you asked yesterday, like what exactly is UI, right? This kind of actually sets the entire set and the entire stack of things that kind of formulates what we call as user experience design. Because again, user experience design is not necessarily one stream, or honestly, it will be very difficult for just one person to do user experience in its full, because user experience depends on the technology, user experience depends on the design, user experience depends on the performance and the bandwidth that you have, everything. So given all that, at least from a design perspective, we can look at a stack and say, what are the elements of user experience that we will be actually bothering about today? And or rather, what we'll be bothering about in any project. There are two parts to this user experience piece itself. I'm going to first talk a little abstract and then move it to actual stuff, right? With some examples in some cases. So let's go to the first slide, which is, so the entire idea of any UX initiative, why I'm calling this an initiative is that any product group or any IT initiative within large corporates, or even a technology company which has got projects within them, it is important to understand the seriousness and the importance of something called as design, which is the actual user experience design. Most often, during the conception of the project, or when you actually do a product or initiate a product, people don't focus on this, and that is unfortunate, because it is important to focus on it. I mean, hopefully after this course, you guys will also become experts in user experience design, that you will become advocates to say, listen, we've got to understand users better. Listen, we've got to do the design in a slightly more informative, interesting way. And that is what the idea is. And that's why you're saying that UX initiatives are conceived as abstract and kind of moved towards a concrete project, which essentially means, first, it is about the thought, the intangibles, the conceptual idea of what the product is. And slowly we move towards things that are concrete as products, or as UX or as IT initiatives, right? So the important thing for us to focus on is the abstraction here. It is a little bit intimidating to start with, but once you move into, or once you understand how this moves into actual deliverables, you will know this better. So first, we will actually see this entire thing in abstraction. This is my first set of stuff. So the bottom thing is the abstract zone. The top is the concrete. Like, how do we actually move from something that is very abstract to concrete is what the stack is about. Now, going further, we are going to actually call each one of these specific deliverables, and we are going to, over the course of the next 50 hours, understand how to make those deliverables so that your project, your product is a success, right? So the bottommost thing is strategy. So we are going from bottom to top, because bottom is the abstract, top is the concrete. Actually, the way you should see it is that once you move up, the users are right on top. Users are interacting with what I have actually called a surface, right? But it is important for us to kind of start from the strategy and go up to the surface. Let's talk a little bit about strategy. Strategy is actually defining the goal and the purpose of the product itself. Uh, in Sedura, you would probably define what is the actual idea of putting the stuff together as that thing that we talked about yesterday, which is children and probably mentors of that children understanding the strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of them so that they can actually define a career map or a career path for them that is not against the grain of that specific person. If we actually define it largely as that, then we can define what the product has got to do. So the strategy is about that. It's about actually defining what is the purpose of the product itself and what will the users gain out of it. When I say users, it's not necessarily one, right? It's multiple user segments. What will the students gain out of it? If you're looking at that kind of a product, what will the students gain out of it? What will the teachers gain out of it? What will the parents gain out of it? What will the school gain out of it? And so on, because it is actually the idea of a set of stakeholders rather than one user, right? And then we'll go to this entire user definition and segmentation in the next chapter, but this is good to know. The second thing that we go up is the scope. Okay, we know the purpose. We know what the users are going to gain out of it, but what are we building, and like what will we include and what will we not include? What are we building and what we are not building is the scope. So defining this is extremely important upfront, because in general, I mean, I've seen products and I've worked on products where technology guys are endlessly building features and functionality and continuously keeping the stuff built, right? Rather than actually defining what we now call as the minimum viable product, and then actually taking the minimum viable product to the next phase, where we really define what we are building and what we are not. So that is another thing that we've got to kind of keep in mind, which is the scope. Scope kind of tightens even the project management piece of the line between what the business, technology, and design guys are going to create, right? So scope is so important for us to even drop a schedule. When you actually put a schedule in place and say, in 5 months, we will achieve this, or in 3 months, we'll achieve this, it is important to know what will you achieve. So it is good to kind of retrofit or go back to say, this is what we want to build, and this is the kind of time that it's going to take with these 3 sets of, or 4 or 5 sets of teams working on it. And that is important to kind of understand scope. The next stuff on top is construct. Construct is a piece where things start coming together, in the sense that you actually start taking the scope and giving it a slightly tangible form. Till now, like strategy and scope are all things that exist mostly as very conceptual sketches and probably very, very rudimentary textual forms. So probably PowerPoints, probably Excel sheets where there is a feature functionality matrix and so on. That's what you have between scope and strategy. But construct is actually starting to move it towards something a little more tangible. Like, for example, you'll start probably doing the actual, the site map, or doing a set of things that, that will actually start, constructing itself into what the product can potentially be. It is actually the line between the abstract and what you're going to build as the concrete. Then the next is the skeletal. Skeletal is easy to say skeletal, but because easy to explain skeletal, because skeletal is where your form takes a functionality, or your function takes a form, in the sense that you take a specific function, like say somebody should register, and then you can actually skeletally indicate a flow, indicate a method in which somebody will get into that entire registration process. And that is the skeleton part of it. And then we go to the surface. Surface is the most emotive layer, where it is the communications and the brand of it merges with the form and the functionality of it, where you actually start looking at pages, interacting with them, and the users actually have an emotive concept of what that specific product is all about. This is largely where we walk in the abstraction, a slightly higher degree of abstraction of what strategy, scope, construct, skeletal surfaces. In the next slide, I'm going to actually break this down even further to actually indicate what are the specific deliverables and thought processes that can help you kind of define each of these pieces, right? Let's talk a little bit more about strategy. Sorry, I kind of skipped these things. Let's talk a little bit about SCAT strategy, right? It is the idea that you get unified common business goals for the team. How will it help your business? The way we will measure the success metrics or measures that we'll define for the product itself. What are the user needs? Like how will we move the user from being aware to being knowledgeable to a complete attitudinal change towards what we are actually what we are actually putting out as a part of the product? That is the strategy. It is actually tying up those three pieces that I talked about yesterday, that technology, design, and business actually has one goal, and they are looking at that one singular goal and define a method in which you can actually be successful or not, and also define the user needs. And that is the largest set of what strategy is. Scope, on the other hand, is a collated view, right? It is about defining and prioritizing requirements in functionality and in content. I think you will understand this best if, from a technology perspective, like there are documents that you write out earlier in the project, which are kind of defining and prioritizing the requirements from the user requirement or software specifications document, as you call it, and in functionality and in the content of what needs to go into this product itself. Like I said earlier, it is also about defining a plan, a schedule, and a set of resources. It is also about resource planning, right? In one sense that if you actually know the time taken, if you actually know the two things. One is the time taken and what you're going to build. You can actually say how many people have got to work for how long to actually make that stuff happen harder. That is also something that is done as a part of the scope itself. So it is important to kind of understand that scope is the project management piece that holds the entire project together at any point of time. It also plans and measures constantly as to how far you have reached in the project itself, right? So that's the part of the scope thing. Let's quickly go to the construct part. This is construct part in information-centric products. So I want to actually differentiate a little bit here. I think there are going to be constantly talking about two kinds of products, Prashant. One product is probably a content-centric or information-centric product where it is like a corporate or a brand website, or if it is like just a content or a news portal. That is one set of products, right? Like, so there'll be people who will be interested in coming to a content portal, and the intent is very different. They want to understand or information. So it is information-centric products in that sense. So like any newspaper or a magazine portal would automatically fall into an information-centric product. I mean, the largest possible information-centric product that we have and we constantly use is Wikipedia, because it's kind of a collaborative product, but it's full of information. The second thing that we'll constantly come back to is functional applications, right? Where you have things to do. You have task flows, like Uber as an application is probably a perfect, Uber or Ola for that matter, is a functional application, right? Your intent is very different. What you want to do is to get a cab, get a ride from one place to another, not necessarily a cab. Now they're giving many more options, but get a ride from one place to the other. It's a transportation is your main focus area, and that is the intent you come in with. Or if you use something like say Cleartrip, where your core intent is to actually book a ticket, either book a ticket or book a room, or travel is your core intent, and you actually come for task flow. So there is a clear difference between information-centric products and functional applications, right? So we'll constantly switch between these two. So in information-centric products, construct will be called as information architecture, typically defined in specific stuff as like a sitemap. How will you box a bunch of things? As you go further, we will talk a little bit more about what are the deliverables, but that's what it is. But in functional applications, this will be called as interaction design. Like, how will you actually define a task flow? How will somebody move over a path from one part to another? Like, the interesting way to say it is that everybody views these things as nodes and links. So if you actually have a set of nodes that you will go through and the links that will connect these nodes, that kind of defines the interaction design itself. Like, a simple way to put it is that in your probable product, you would say that first the child come in and understand, then second is probably register, then third is probably go to the evaluation form, fourth is probably go through a certain set of tests, and fifth is probably understand the results, and sixth is probably download it and get out. That is probably the I'm guessing, this is a guesswork, but that's probably the width of the interaction that we need to deal with. And so that becomes the kind of the construct of your product itself. So typically large products which has got multiple task flows, the constructs are written down and put together to kind of define the overall construct of the entire website. In technology, you guys will probably call it as modules. Each module has got a construct and a method in which the user will walk through the module in some way. If you actually just take in travel, if you actually look at these two sites, it's like a travel wiki versus a booking site. Travel wiki is probably the best example of an information site where the intent is largely about destination, understanding destinations, what to do, and so it is all textual, content heavy, and actually gives you more knowledge than things to do, right? And then functional application, it is like the Cleartrip, which we talked about. It is also about understanding how people's mind work, and when they are actually thinking about a process that they go through, or thinking about a specific information that they are seeking for. It is also kind of preempting a behavior, a set of behavior that they would think of. Like, a good way to kind of correlate it is offline, what would you do? Like, for example, if you actually want to know about a place, you typically, a place that you want to visit. Let's assume that you're going to do a trip to a new place that you have not done before. And offline, what you would do is to get information from your friend circle or people nearby who have been to that place before. So there is an intent, there is a behavior, there is a method in which you understand. All that kind of falls into this idea called construct, right? And then we go to the next one, which is the entire skeletal form of that functionality. Like, you actually take that functionality that you have listed down, the task flows and the set of things that you want to do with these specific task flows, and convert them into rudimentary, concrete presentation pieces in a slightly refined level of detail. And you will also define individual components. Like, for example, what is registration? How is registration relevant to my process of actually booking a ticket? Or how can I store something that I have seen, or save something that I've seen as information as in the portal itself in an interesting way? what does me as a user have to do with this entire set of all that individual components in the relationship are defined in the skeletal, in the skeletal surface, right? In the perfect way to kind of explain this in your situation is that, let's assume a kid has actually taken a test, a multiple set of tests over time, and there is a progression that is indicated in these tests. Where is it stored? Where can I kind of revisit the test back? If I am a mentor for that child, and probably 5 more children, how can I see the set of people who have actually progressed? How can I see my mentees and their set of stuff, right? So that is an interesting way of looking at the correlation between individual components and relationships within as functionality, and give it a form to it, right? So that is something that happens in the skeletal layer. Surface is overall easy. You actually define personality through a color palette, like a define a hierarchy, like organization of information through how one is a little more important than the other. All that done through typography, color, imagery, and you can lead the user's eye through a set of things in an order that you want them to approach. And you can also use elements of contrast and uniformity to highlight or subdue information on a page or on a portal itself. So that is largely what the surface is going to be, right? This is still, we are in the abstraction of it. We haven't gone to the detail of what we can do with it. And I think that is something that we are going to discuss as we go further. So going back very quickly to, this is what we saw. We saw strategy, scope, construct, skeletal, and surface. We saw that strategy is largely about what do you want to get out of the product, what do your users want to get out of it. Scope is about, do we know what we are building and what we are not. Construct is about slowly evolving a form, the line between the abstract and the concrete. That skeletal is between refining the form that the functionality actually takes. Surface is the emotive layer of the brand, which is color, imagery, and typography. That is emotive, and that is the user-facing thing, right? That is one level of understanding elements of user experience design. We go to the next one. These are deeper element planes. If you actually look at the left-hand side, I still have that stuff of strategy, scope, construct, skeletal, and surface indicated to kind of say, what are all the sub parts of it? What is all the stuff that you and I will quickly understand and probably actually construct them or put them together to actually make these deliverables definite in a specific project context. These things which are on the right hand side are probably the deliverables that a UX person along with the technology help. In some cases, it's a collaborative process, will put it together and list them or keep them. And when you are actually asked for a process, these are probably the evidences of you going through a process to actually build an entire product together. Let's actually visit the strategy layer one by one as we go further. But it's important to understand these are more tangible and actionable versions of the user experience design process. It is something that you've got to hold to your heart forever if you're actually doing user experience design. In one sense, this is going to also help you in the technology development process because it correlates quite a bit with what the technology will be doing for this stuff. So let us go further into it. Let us actually focus on the strategy part of it, which is user needs and product objectives. User needs are externally derived goals for the product through research. We will go in great detail in the next class of user needs. It's about understanding, observing, engaging, and immersing yourself with the users to kind of outside, which is why it says externally derived goals, right? So from the users, and you will become the advocate of what the user thinks about this product, this project, this thing that you're building, which you do not know yet. And that is what you will take as user needs to the team. And that is what this is about. It's externally derived goals for the product through quantitative and qualitative research. Quantitative means you will actually collect stuff which are predominantly done through surveys and stuff like that, where it's all about numbers. How do the larger user base feel about something, this way or that way? It's more like polls, more like surveys. While qualitative, it is about how they feel. It is more about the feeling and the experience and how they go through, and the deeper emotive connect with what they have to do. So those are the things that we will visit in the next class in detail. And then we'll go to the product objectives. Product objectives are what the business, technology, creative, other internally derived goals for the product itself, right? Like, for example, what do we want the product to achieve from a business perspective? What do we want the product to achieve from a technology perspective? How does it correlate with what the users actually want? Is largely what the product objectives is. And also, like I said earlier, it is also what does a success mean to product? So how will you actually measure success over a period of time for the product itself? Those are the things you will define there. Now, unfortunately, just the design team cannot define it, because you need the business team telling you, this is what we are trying to do with this product. You need the technology team telling you, this is what we are trying to build or create out of this thing. And you need the design team telling you, this is what the users need. So we've got to correlate this into an appropriate strategy that works hard. That's largely what this entire area is about, which is user needs and product objective. The next thing that we go to is functional specifications and content requirements, right? Functional specifications is loosely, we can call it as feature set. They are actually extremely detailed descriptions of the functionality the site must include in order to meet the user needs. What can the user do in this product that you're building? So you typically say the user can do this, this, and this. So I think that is very, very important for people to kind of understand and clearly indicate before you even start putting your pen to paper, or rather your hand to the keyboard, because it is, unless we know what we are building, we cannot build it right. So this is the feature set and the detailed description of functionality the site must include in order to meet the user needs. Content requirements is about definition of all the content elements required in the site in order to meet the user needs again. So let me talk a little bit more about both these functional specifications and content requirements. One stuff that I left out here intentionally because it doesn't fall into the user experience gamut is schedule, or rather the plan, the project plan. I think that is also something that could be included in the scope stuff, but it's out of the gamut. User experience guys should be working hard along with the other people to create a project plan at this point, which is the scope area. We will talk about project plan a little bit, but I don't want to make it a hard deliverable from user experience design itself, right? Before we go there, let's talk a little bit more about functional specifications or feature set. And what I mean by a functional specification of feature set. At some point in time, when we actually reach that place where we do this in the course, I'll give you guys templates. I will actually send you some example feature functionality list as to how to write the feature functionality that is very user facing, or rather from a user's perspective, right? So this functionality, if I split it again from the perspective of informational site and a task or a functional site, they are slightly different from each other. Like in a place like a functionality functionality driven site, like which is probably like an Uber, you would actually define stuff in a slightly more granular way, and that is something that we got to kind of clearly understand. So from in if you actually take Uber, you will say the user can see, or rather avail, in the larger gamut of umbrella is the user can avail transport from one place to another, to reach another place, by indicating location. That is probably the stuff. So automatically pick up the idea of a location. So the user will be able to see the options of transport available within the specific location area, and so on. Like that, it'll go on till defining the user can, pay when he or she gets out of the stuff, and also a set of things that is after the entire trip is over, where the user can actually see the set of trips that he or she has done, get a monthly report, and so on. There's a whole bunch of things that you can probably do. And this we'll do it as an exercise a little later, when we actually try to look at a product that we already have in use and try to convert that into a feature functionality specification document on a template, so that we are very, very clear about what we are doing. We'll move to the content requirements, right? Content requirements is a little more complicated than the feature functionality list, because you've got to assume a set of things, right? And the intent is different, like I said earlier. So with the content requirements, you've got to actually assess what is the kind of content that you need to put in a website or a product that you're building, and multiple types of content. And you will also define whether there is an interesting way of doing it, whether it is build, buy, or borrow content. I'll explain this a little better. So build is actually, you will write those pieces of content or shoot those images or create those videos and so on, which is important to define as a part of the scope. Right? And buy is actually, you will go out, and if it is available, you will buy that whole bunch of content and integrate it along with your site, which is probably go to Getty Images and buy a bunch of images, or go to a video site and buy a bunch of videos that will integrate very well. Instead of actually creating those videos, which is what you would do if you're actually saying it as build, right? So build, buy, or borrow. Borrow is interesting. So this is through collaboration, right? You can actually syndicate content through somebody else. Like, for example, at some point of time, if you do think that it's important for you to have other IQ-based tests integrated with your product, Prashant, or if you actually think that it's an important stuff to better your content in some way through collaborating with somebody to create small tests, and that is the syndication of the content, which is actually borrow content. So it's not yours, but you're borrowing for a specific piece of time, right? So that's what I meant by the borrow. So that is the entire build, buy, and borrow of content. There is an entire chapter dedicated to content down the syllabus of this course, and we are going to go into this in great depth in terms of, we'll be doing stuff that is like, how do you actually define a calendar? How do you define a content schema? How do you define the overall content strategy itself, and so on? And it might not be greatly relevant to your product. It is probably partially relevant to your product, but it's greatly relevant to user experience as a whole, because that's one part where products fail quite a bit because people haven't thought through the idea of and width of content and how that will come into your product itself, right? So that is something that we'll focus on further down in this thing itself, in the course itself, right? One more interesting thing that we've got to kind of know about content is also the fact that there is instructional content that we cannot omit. As a part of user experience, you actually have to instruct the user to do a set of things, right? Like, so go here, click on this. If you click here, you will find this, or if you do this, you can, get these benefits, are all part of the content map or a content schema of a product itself that is important to kind of fill. Like when we actually talk about brand and tonality, we will talk about how to speak, right? And like for example, that Amazon has got a tonality to it, a certain way of talking about it. While if you actually go to the BBC News site, probably the tonality is way more serious than how Amazon deals with the stuff. That entire method of talking, or what we call as the voice and the tonality of the entire content, and the instructional content of how to move, how to help the user move between places using content, is something that we should not omit at all. And those are the larger thought about functional specifications and content requirements for which are defined as the scope. Now, what I have not spoken about earlier, which I want to talk about for a little bit of thing. It's not there in detail in the presentation, though I will talk about it so that it's there in the recording, is the project plan. This scope is also a part of the stuff where technology team, business team, and design team kind of sits together and kind of redefines or really defines a method in which we can put the project together over a timeline and deliver it on time, on quality, as they keep saying it. So if you actually do not plan, do not actually put this together, it's going to be very difficult to deliver it on time and on quality. And that's the part that I'm going to talk about for a wee bit of time, right? Typically, a plan contains three things. It contains, or a project plan largely contains three things that is kind of relevant for the user experience designer to partake in. The first part that it contains is a schedule plan, a plan where actually there is a schedule that is defined upfront in terms of how much time are people going to take. So typically, user experience design is broken into like three parts, depending on the kind of team and the kind of breakages that you have in your team itself, right? So the first three parts, but these are channels that has got to run because they are interdependent to each other. So the first part will be largely about information architecture. When I'm saying information architecture, I'm largely talking about the entire, from the information architecture down till the skeletal version of doing wireframe. So largely we'll box that as information architecture, right? Or you can call it UX itself. So, but UX unfortunately includes brand and visual design. So I would rather keep this as IA. So one line that will be about information architecture, where people are going to take the product till the skeletal level. The second line is going to be about visual design, or rather it's about understanding the brand, converting the brand into a set of color palette, defining the tonality and voice for it in some way, working with the information architecture team to kind of redefine what information architecture has done as the skeletal to convert it into the surface or the visual designed pages that are integration ready to with the technology, right? So that is that part of the stuff. The third line item that is going to be there under user experience is content. Like if we do build, buy, borrow, what are we building, what are we buying, what are we borrowing, how are you going to map each one of the stuff that we do from a functionality, from a content requirement perspective, to how it all going to come together for an imminent launch that you actually think is going to happen in, say, I don't know, 10 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever you have defined as the timeline for the product. And we will try and visit this at some point of time as an added information and added content. I will try and get some templates that can be put out on this. But honestly, this is not it's not owned by user experience design. It's owned by a project management team. But most often what happens is that the user experience design team kind of collaborates with the project management team to actually put a lot of processes in place and sub-processes in place and define that timeline appropriately for what they own, which is the IA and the visual design and the content. That kind of closes scope for us. We go to interaction design and information architecture. A good way to kind of differentiate this. Interaction design is about application flows to facilitate user tasks, defining how the user interacts with the site functionality. The top, which is interaction design, is largely for task flows, where it's feature functionality led products and websites and enterprise applications and so on, while information architecture is structural design of the information space to help the user intuitively access content, right? Like, so that is a content or an information centric page, like it is an information portal or we spoke about this earlier, information portal or a content portal and so on. Interaction design is quite an interesting set of things that we need to do. We will be doing. We will actually create a whole bunch of task flows that are interesting enough to illustrate how the user flows from one place to another place. Like I told you earlier, it is the nodes and the links. The nodes kind of define the places that the user has got to reach over a period of time. Links actually define the path in which the user can reach these nodes, so that we can actually see the entire process flow. Like the best way to kind of try out the nodes and links is one of the stuff that they keep saying is that how do you make toast or how do you make coffee is an interesting method in which you can actually draw out a set of nodes and links, right? There is a huge TED talk that is on about using these nodes and links to illustrate how do you make toast. I'll try and take that link and put it up here too. So that is an interesting method in which you can illustrate task flows very well. Methods in which you can actually say, like Uber's task flow would be typically, indicate where you're present, and so see a set of transport options, request for a transport option that is correct for you, choose the kind of options that is available, and then wait. And then there's a sub thing which will be contact driver or contact blah blah. That will be the sub task flow that will happen here, offline probably. And then you will actually have a method in which what the driver can do as a task flow, which is the other user is probably start the trip, and you can actually see the trip has started. While you are in the car, you can actually change the destination if you want to. The trip will get updated to the user, and the user can actually, the driver can move from the actual Uber app to look at navigation and so on. These are all task flows. You can actually link them up as how will the stuff flow over a period of time. Technology guys intuitively understand this, but a lot of other people really do not. And it's especially people who have worked with static design formats like graphic designers or who do not really understand the concept of longer flows. It is best to kind of do these as examples and see where we can take this. And that is what interaction design is all about. Then let's talk about information architecture a little bit. It's a bit of a pain. Information architecture is one place. See, task flow, it is kind of interaction design is easily definable because the intent is kind of that. Like, why am I opening the Uber app? I'm opening because I want to get a transport, right? Like the intent is extremely clear in that sense. Why am I opening Google Maps? Because I want to understand, how to reach this place, or I want to understand what is nearby, or so on. But that's not how information architecture works. The intent is a little blurry, other than saying that unless you are actually searching for some very specific information. So if I actually go to a place, so let's assume a scenario, right, Prashant? Let's assume that this is Ugadi weekend, and unfortunately, this weekend is not long enough. But if there was a long weekend and you're actually looking to go out somewhere and like travel to some place, and you do not know really where, and you're actually looking for options to see where, and you will actually go to a website probably through Google by searching for options or long weekend options from Hyderabad kind of stuff. And you will go to a website and see the entire stuff that is there. So the entire discovery part of your process, right, it's a little nebulous. Other than knowing that you want to go to someplace outside Hyderabad, which you can probably return within 3 days, there is no specific other stuff unless you kind of keep funneling down and give you methods of filter, methods of sorting, and reach information that you reach over a period of time. At least here, the intent is kind of clear that you want to travel or you want to go to some place. But when you actually do go to a magazine, or if you use Flipboard at all, if you actually go into a Flipboard, the intent is not that. Even if you go to a specific magazine that is kind of very focused, like say Cricinfo or Economic Times, or even those, there is a certain method of discovery that actually goes through a process of understanding it by muddling through. You actually walk through the pages and understand the hierarchies and bookmark and hold some of these things that you will want to hold in a place that you will come back and revisit, and so on. So there is a process by which information architecture is kind of discovered. So like you actually discover, there is a discovery, there is a choice, there is a method in which the intent is fulfilled in one way, and those three boxes are stuff that is going to happen right through a process of search, filter, sort, or by just plain browsing, depending on what kind of user you are, how much time you have to spend on it, and what is the intent with which you want to spend on it. So information architecture, it's about defining intuitive and useful hierarchies to your to the content or the information that is available for you in a website, so that you can easily access information, discover it, and keep it for later, so that you can revisit it if and when necessary. And that is what information architecture as content is all about. There are some examples that I'm indicating in this. So like an open sitemap of Amazon is a perfect example of probably information architecture, right? Like, let's visit this, let's focus on this a little bit more. Categories. Over time, people have defined how users perceive categories in an extremely large website, which is full of things to buy. And what are the intuitive ideas of these categories and how things are subdivided in within these huge lot of SKUs that are going to be kind of dumped in this large website, right? And these categories actually define a method in which you navigate, an intuitive method in which you can actually go from one place to the other. Like, for example, the reason something is named as TV, appliances, and electronics has got a reason. There is a research. There is a best practice in which why that category is defined that way. Probably TV is not looked at as an appliance. Probably TV doesn't fit into the real electronics. And if you actually go down to it, if you see musical instruments and professional audio is also a part of like TV, appliances, and electronics. And that is done through like gathering data, gathering user behavior, gathering understanding over a period of time. That has become a best practice. It has become such a best practice that using Amazon categorization for any website is open source. You can go ahead and use these categories exactly the way they have categorized for selling your wares, whichever way you want to. And that is that actually defines the information architecture and how it actually comes into play when you look at a website like really Amazon. That is the information architecture part of what we've been talking about. I haven't really illustrated interaction design, I think, though I have also said how does the information architecture convert into like a possible interaction and a possible method of seeing the same thing in multiple ways on the website itself. This is actually the drop down that happens when you click on categories and how you view them. And if you click on that full store category at the bottom, you'll go to the big page, which is filled with categories of all types, right? So this is how what you defined as a site map or as a category map is kind of correlated or collated in an interesting way to represent as a part of your interface design, information design, and eventually as visual design on top, right? So we'll visit all that while we are going, but I wanted to quickly show you this too. Unfortunately, I haven't given an example of interaction design, but interaction design, like I said earlier, the best example could be Uber and Uber's task flow, right? So that is what that stuff is all about. I'm going to stay a little bit on interaction design, information architecture, and make sure you have got everything and there is nothing that you want to ask me more. Let's move on to the next one, which is navigation design, interface design, information design. Very, very important, very important set of things that you should know. So let's talk about interface design first. Interface design is actually converting your interaction design that you did into pages which has got elements of interface, which is the best possible way to explain is, and there are rules about it, right? The best possible ways to explain is in your interaction design, you would have said that the user has got to register. The registration can happen in 3 ways. You can register using a social media platform, which is like a Facebook, LinkedIn, or whatever. Register using some other partner website. Like, for example, if you do have a Gmail ID, you don't need to register here. You can use the Gmail ID. That's another method of registering. And the other method of registering is like ground up, you register, right? Those are the stuff that has been said as a part of the interaction design. Interface design is actually listing a set of form fields and options where do you want to register using Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or do you have a Gmail account, or do you want to do it the long drawn out way? And then list of stuff where first name, last name, depending on how much information that you want to gather, you will ask them, which country are you from, which city are you from, which occupation are you in, what are the age group, and so on and so forth. And each one has got a grammar to it, right? Like, for example, if you're actually asking a country, you surely can't, I mean, it's probably 200 odd thingies, so you can't probably use like a radio button, right? Especially radio buttons are for one single click, choosing one single thing, but 200 of them, you can't list them to actually click it on a radio button. The best possible option is a drop down. Now, the drop down with the actual quick search or a lookup kind of a search is probably the best thing that will work. You go and type IN and it automatically gives you Indonesia and India. Click on India, you're done, right? So those kind of stuff and that kind of detailing is what interface design is all about. It is about weighing priorities. Like, for example, if you are asking about hobbies, for example, it should be multiple checks, right? Like it will say photography, writing, something else, something. I should be able to check more than one, which essentially means it will be check boxes. While if I actually have occupation, and occupation will be student, professional, and something else, it should be a radio button. I can't be I mean, you can be, but then I don't want you to select student and professional both, right? So those are the kind of ideas and thinking that you need to do for actually defining interfaces, by doing interface elements and putting them together so that they work very well in the interaction design or the workflow that we have defined earlier, right? And that's kind of key and very, very important to kind of have it in your head, because we are going to do exercises that convert some basic forms or basic questions that we have into interface design and interfaces. Forms and fields are probably the most complicated ways to understand interface elements. But having said that, there are also list pages that are quite tricky. Like, I hope what you know what I mean by list pages. It's basically, if I search and I get a search result, that is a typical list page, right? A list page has got a set of other things. You should be able to filter down a list to a set of things that is pertinent to you. You should be able to sort the list, in an ascending or a descending order. And then ascending and descending works only for numericals and words, and really does not, or ratings, for example. It does not work for other things. Those are also interaction elements that get very, very critical and interesting and very cool when you do it the right way. And that is the interface design part of it. Then we've got the navigation design, like which cannot be negated. I mean, you kind of intuitively know that we've gone slowly into page level elements, right? We've gone into, from the conceptual idea of a larger workflow and a larger stuff, to more concrete idea of actually doing page level elements like interfaces and navigational elements and so on, right? So navigational elements actually helps you jump from one place to the other within the product itself. First of all, it makes you clearly understand where you are in reference to the stuff. I'm going back to the exact example that I gave you earlier, is the difference between actually a nodal link, or me indicating how to reach from here to MG Road as a nodal link, versus actually showing it on a map, which is the navigational method of doing it, so that you always know where you are in reference to the larger project, the product, or the product that the interaction piece that you're using in some way, right? So in websites, it can be defined as like the breadcrumbs. Actually, the best way to explain breadcrumbs is if I go to a website and it shows how it leads from one thing to the other on top before giving the title. Let me see if I can actually pull up a example of a breadcrumb and show that to you. See the line on top, Prashant, that says above the title is Russia votes with strongman Putin set for fourth term, right? You can see the page
Yes,
that I'm talking about, right?
yes, yes. It's like news slash
Above,
world news slash Europe.
yes, that is
Okay,
breadcrumbs.
okay, fine. The way we
That is
see in
called,
blogs, yeah, the blogs. I
yeah.
mean,
So why is it
the,
called breadcrumbs? Is that there is, I don't know whether you know the story of Hansel and Gretel, right? Like there is a
no, no.
old fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel where Hansel and Gretel are these two small kids who walk into the forest, and they want to track the way back because they find this house made of chocolate and house made of chocolate and sweets and stuff like that. But they want to track the way back, so they keep throwing pieces of bread on the floor so that they can track back. They can go back home.
Okay, okay, okay.
Okay, so they're not to get lost. So the idea of breadcrumbs actually comes from there. It comes from that that thing. So it's kind of good to know that in one sense. And yeah, so that is the navigation. So navigation design is about putting those things in places, right? Ability to kind of see what are all those pieces of navigation, what are all those pieces of information, what are all those pieces of information that is available across the website, or task that is a functionality that is available across the website, and where am I, and how can I reach those multiple places. So if you actually remember the Times of India stuff, there was the breadcrumbs. Above that, there is the entire navigation line, which actually have this persistent navigation right through. Wherever you are, that navigation will be always present so that you can go to any part of the website if you want to, right? And that's what navigation design is all about. This stuff called as Tuftian sense of information design. Okay, what is information design? Information design is about defining hierarchies in a page. A page has got its own hierarchy. Even if you go back to that page that we actually looked at earlier in this thing, the Times of India page that we looked at earlier, or even if you look at the page, I'm going to walk you through one of the pages. I'm going to do a quick new share and walk you through one of the pages that I've got open. This is Lonely Planet, where I couldn't find the breadcrumbs, but I found a lot of other things which are interesting. So if I actually look at this page, or even if I go to the homepage of Lonely Planet, right? Like, so there is a hierarchy of information that you can actually see. That is quite interesting. Like if I look at this page, you can see this page that I've got, like with a gorilla, and it's changing. Can you see it, Prashant?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, great. So there is a set of things that it shows me constantly, right? One is that it is showing me a set of images that is jumping from one to the other. At the bottom, you can actually see the things the stories that are jumping. Then there is the actual navigation that is on top, that I can see the persistent navigation that is right on top on the right side, where video destinations, booking, shop. But the most important thing that is pushing towards me in its hierarchy are the stories, which are the featured articles right up there. There is a set of it'll actually, while it's showing that, it's also showing me what are the other set of featured articles at the bottom. The search on the left-hand side top is kind of more prominent than the links on the right-hand side. Sign-in is made a little more prominent than the other guys by actually putting a interesting box around it. But the most important thing, and it's also, if you actually look at the right side bottom, it also says that there is a scrollability that is there. You see the small mouse thing, which is quite an interesting thought. Yeah, just scroll down, and that is there. And the most interesting part is that other than the color of the photograph, there is no other color there. The entire stuff is done through various methods of using sizes and weights of typography that are used interestingly and in the right size, the right way, to indicate what is more important than the other. That is information design. Let me scroll down. As I scroll down, you will see how there are equality of information that is given to two things, right? Like City Maces, Lonely Planet magazine design, both have got kind of equal amount, while there is the space and the links by color and the type in which the links are written by the book subscribed now is kind of a little more important or indicated as a hierarchy that is higher than the body copy or the small blurb that is written before that, right? And if I actually scroll down further, the featured videos and the set of videos on the left hand side, one prime video that is there on the left hand side, and the right hand side there is a list of featured videos, and how I can actually navigate between one and the other are stuff that is kind of indicated quite interestingly as a navigation process itself. And automatically it indicates, if I actually click on the one of the videos, the video will start playing, right? Like, so sorry, I'm going to pause this for a minute. So the video will start playing. Nobody told me this, but the method in which it's configured, that it's indicating that I will go to the next video and it's connected to this page. The blue kind of connects to that, and that is information design. And then there is that travel inspiration piece at the bottom. There is a bunch of related, but way below in the scroll, that kind of indicates how I can actually move to a specific equal but same reference points. Here, all the images are way more important than the text. I'll find the text in some way, and so on. And, you know, like that is, and even this, while the stuff that you saw are all about information, there is a bunch of tasks here too. And how do you actually redefine the tasks and the priority for the task? By using icons and saying that these are verbs, these are tasks that you can do. You can ask for advice, you can book for a flight, you can book a room, or you can get travel insurance. Unlike above here, it actually is information which says bags for every itinerary, right? It's more of an information piece, while these are tasks, and so on. So look at the way that hierarchy is constantly defined over this entire set of pages that we look at, and that is eventually moving something from interaction design to information design. And another interesting thing to look at is probably a site where you can actually see this as a task flow, and information design seen as a task flow. Look at this. This is one of the simplest, most beautiful travel websites that we have in India, and you know, can be proud of the UX in one way, right? Prioritization, big, written right up there, is like search flights. Fly anywhere, fly everywhere, written down to that stuff. A clear set of interaction guidelines that is given there. Hierarchy of what I can do on the left side, and highlights it in some way to indicate how I can move from one to the other. Look at the way even that line that wraps around hotels and seeps into the search for hotels, showing that the white is a part of this stuff, and this is what you have clicked on, and this arrow indicates this is what it is, right? Like so. And the prioritization of the deals on the right side. So the deals are changing based on where I am. Flight deals on top becomes hotel deals when I actually go further down. Local becomes more informative than becoming, so automatically it says things to do in Bangalore, and goes into the kind of the zone that we talked about in Lonely Planet, because this is more about information. Of course, there are tasks that are buried in it, but information is way more important, and the hierarchy of those information, right? So without confusing you too much, let me actually move back to that share screen and talk a little bit more about information design in the Tuftian sense. Is about defining hierarchy within a specific page where something is presented, so that people can understand how these elements are linked to one another, and what is more important than the other, and the hierarchy of information within a page. That is what information design is all about. So one of the examples that I did have is ClearTrip itself, right, as an example, where you actually look at the results of a page and how they have highlighted things are so very interesting with the hierarchy. On the left-hand side, I know that there is a set of things I can do to the results themselves by defining filter, and on top that, the like all flights is a black and a reverse that is way more important than all the other stuff that I see. It is right on top. I could click on that modify search on the left hand side and change the stuff around and so on and so forth. That is the information design given very clearly, where I can actually, the price and the book along with the price is so important for me on the right side that I will constantly look at it, and that's a decision point, right? So when I actually decided that I need to go to Colombo at some point of time, I do a search of this sort, and I actually get options that are like this, which I can actually filter, sort, and probably find the right flight for me to fly to Colombo. So this is probably a fabulous example of defining information design. Hopefully, at some point in time when we reach the visual design thing later in the course, we will be able to create fabulously designed information design pages like this. We will then now go to visual design. And I'm happy that I was able to kind of indicate a lot of examples by going up and down on, onto specific pages and things like that. We will actually go to visual design now. Visual design is the graphic treatment of the interface elements. Visual design, the visual treatment of text, graphic page elements, and navigational components that are interesting enough, that are worth like talking about and worth defining, so that it can actually take on the emotive, the voice, and the style and the brand of what the end product is all about. Some of the examples that I have is this, like Accenture redid their entire brand recently. And so what did they do to this is the content managed website, but still, what did they do to their entire color palette? How do they increase the typography? How do they define something which is way nicer and interesting as a color palette, and use that with a tonality to actually paint a picture that is appropriate, is what visual design is all about. We will go at great lengths and great depths to talk about how can we actually convert something that is skeletal in information design, interface design, and navigation design to something that is a consolidated, beautifully rendered visual design on a page. Right? We will talk about that as we go towards the end of our course itself in the sessions that are to come further down, right? So another interesting stuff to see is also visual design in a kind of a more mute and a light fashion. This is flipboard as seen on a machine, unlike seen on a mobile. So this also indicates the idea of how each of these information pieces have been arranged in an interesting way, and the typography and the color is so subdued, yet defines especially the white spaces, defines the method in which you can access these information interestingly and well. Right? That is what visual design is largely about, right? So this is going back. I'm going to quickly run through the stuff that we did. We kind of walked through the idea of from construct on. We walked through the idea of interaction design and information architecture. Talked about some of the examples which are there in Amazon and so on. We talked about how the information architecture shows up on your interaction, or rather in your visual design side. We also talked about information design, interface design, and navigation design. Looked at some examples outside of what we had in the presentation, and then We talked about ClearTrip as one of the examples of where there is a great information design, interface design, and probably navigation design too. There is also, I mean, one of the stuff that I want to indicate also is the persistent navigation on top, that where you actually know that you can jump from, so flight is highlighted, you'll know that you can get rooms, and also you can do trains. So that's the stuff that is on top. Beautiful, small, iconized, not too complicated. That is also a part of a very good information design. And further down, the visual design too, because it kind of talks about how you can convert something which is strongly brand oriented, like in an Accenture website, or strongly information oriented, like in an UX design website. So quickly,
UX here.
sorry, what did I say?
UX design.
No, from a visual design perspective, sorry.
Yes.
UX design, I read what was written on that thing. Sorry about that. This is
Okay.
from a visual design perspective. I mean,
Okay.
see, this is also visual design, right, in one sense, but ability to kind of hold it down, not too bold, not too unnecessarily, and typography is so beautifully done. So all that done so well, so the information is not lost in any possible way, while the brand is also kept intact very well by using minimal amount of colors, minimal amount of typography, and beautifully displayed stuff on white is what this is all about, and how visual design is actually used to better information design or the UX at large, right? This is the entire stuff put in one slide quickly. It's important to know that user needs and product objectives. Important to know what function specifications are and content requirements are. Interaction design and information design, interface design, navigation design, information design, and eventually visual design that culminates the entire elements of user experience design into one stack. If you know all this, honestly, how to do all this, you will be fantastic at doing visual design. Using user experience design. And that's what is so important for you to understand and critical for this entire course that we're going to go further. And that's all I have for today. Shall we spend a little bit of time visiting one of the stuff? But I will try and do a very, very quick, small example.
Case study. Yeah.
Case study. Yeah, that we did. That I have worked on personally.
Okay.
It actually shows from beginning till the end. My cases are not going to be specific only to what we talk about that day.
Okay.
So this case study is actually, I'm trying to showcase Big Basket today to you.
Okay.
And I'm going to do this more as like the entire project case study, rather than looking at it as, just what we spoke about today. I mean, it's pointless just talking about what we spoke about today, because you won't understand how it will fit into the larger scope of things. So, at one point in time, I was extremely skeptical about e-commerce. Very, very, this is ages back. So Big Basket actually contacted me in 2004 or 2005 or something, even before they actually started anything. And I was very, very skeptical about how e-commerce will do in this country, because I wasn't sure.
Flipkart wasn't there at that time?
I think probably all these things were very, very early. But I'm saying they were all selling books and moved to thing. I was very worried about, okay, let me put it this way. I was very worried about people selling grocery.
Okay.
Online, right? I see, because for me, e-com was more about delivery rather than about the user experience online.
Yes, of course.
Offline user experience was equally or more important than the online experience.
Yes.
And it's got to be seamless continuation from the online to the offline.
Yes.
That for me, I thought we as a country, as a community, as a society, are not mature yet to kind of do something. But eventually they came back again to me way later. We are talking about probably 6 years, 7 years later. They came back to me where they had actually done, and they were a successful company, but they were pretty poor in terms of the online user experience. Offline, they had kind of tied up with multiple people to actually devise their
Do operations,
logistics.
logistics.
Yeah,
Yes.
good operations, good supply chain that kind of help them procure stuff very well and deliver it till the end the end customer, right? So we were asked to kind of relook selling groceries online in a user from an user experience perspective,
Okay.
and look at it and say, what is this thing? What is this entire method of doing online grocery all about? So immediately what we did was, listen, we want to talk to X number of people. We want to talk to people who've actually bought with you and dropped out from buying from here on, like
Okay.
non-loyalists, right? We're loyal at one point in time, they stop being loyal for some odd reason or
Loyal.
the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, then there are loyalists who are like loyal. Then there are people who actually will not shop online for groceries, uh, and so on. So we actually defined a set of users. We did a whole load of video
Research.
and audio and surveys. So interviews, surveys, focus groups. Those are the three things that we did to actually get into the mind of the user and deconstruct the experience in different levels, right? Like, the brief from them was this. You can read it on the screen. Understand the users better. It worked harder and provided a choice of experiences that are good, right? Right. So we actually said that it's got to be a personable expert, right? It's got to be like an expert who can suggest very, very quickly, convert the entire idea. This is something that you will keep hearing, from me during the course, is that this 3 or 4 areas of how you actually see this any process from a user perspective, right? You will see it as, like, first one is discovery. How does somebody go and discover what he or she needs in a product, right? The second one is choice. Ability to present a choice that is wide enough, that I can filter from, that I can sort, and that I can choose. So that third option is the ability to choose well. And the fourth phase is that how do I fulfill, pay easily, and get product home, that entire fulfillment. And how does the business retain, or how is it sticky for me to go back as a user, which is retention of the user itself, right? And this is something that we constantly visit and bother about in every product that we do. If I actually go the entire width, we'll talk about it later when I actually talk about users and user movement through the stuff. And in the next lesson, we will do it in way great more detail. But the larger thought of ability to kind of move from, the user should be aware of your product. The user should actually get knowledgeable about your product. The user should attitudinally change about, like grocery, I want to actually try Big Basket. It's an attitudinal change, right? You've got to actually, from someone who actually is not happy with the online buying of grocery, if you've got to change them towards, okay, you need to try. So attitudinally, from no to try is a change. So attitudinal change, and then you actually make them discover what they have in the product and make them choose in an interesting way, make them fulfill in an interesting way, make them be retained by the business in an interesting way, and hopefully they'll come back for the loop of ability to discover again, choose, and fulfill and retain themselves, so that loop kind of continues, and hopefully that's good for the business. That is something we'll come back again and again as a process, but it is relevant in this Big Baskets case. So if you actually look at the same product from the perspective of the dimensions of the user, like let's start with the right side top. There should be a whole wide range that is available. So that is like the fruits and vegetables, grocery, dairy and beverages, confectionery, meat, non-veg lovers, so on and so forth. A whole bunch of things that actually gives me a wide range of possible. And these are people who we spoke to and understood that these are the things that are important for people, right? It was important that it had options, like ability to see options for the experience, that is by browse, by search, by offers, or ability to see it by what I have done before, like wish lists and requests that I have done before, ability to see it by, tweak it by an offline feedback or an online feedback, ability to see it by kind of deliveries and options of sort in deliveries, monthly reminders, setting shopping schedule, and so on. Ability to shop by lists, by themes, and even by events, like for what can I do for Diwali kind of stuff, right? And so on. So I've got to have a lot of options. I should have ability to engage well. The system should have good ability to engage well over this stuff. So you will also see a small legend at the bottom that says there are some of the features that are existing already. Some of the features can be extended from what is existing. Some of the features are completely new additions to the extension, and some of the features are suggested possibilities but might not happen at all. You see that stuff at the bottom?
Yes.
Cool. So on the left hand side bottom, then we go to the extension pieces, syndicated content. They never had these things. Can we actually have content about cooking, recipe collections for specific stuff, stories which are interesting about sourcing and procurement, like if they are organic stuff and vegetables that they actually source from very good farms, can they actually do video stories, small video stories about these farms, so that it's kind of talks about responsible sourcing, and so on. That is the entire extension plan that we came up about. Then we go to advocacy, right? Advocacy is how do you make the users. So the advocacy, I'm on advocacy on the left hand side, right? Which is actually how do you make the users talk about your product to other users and help them change opinion or awareness or attitudinal change towards. So it is like, how can we actually promote through social promotions and contests, Facebook, Instagram, promoting health, promoting green, and so on. So that is the entire thought of that. Then the value, the perceived value. It's like, how do you actually culture correct this stuff based on geography handling? So one of the stuff that we used to constantly think about is that, if you actually take a simple product like jaggery, it's people will search for 10 different things for jaggery. They could search for it as Bella, as good, as anything. And how does this handle it? How can the system handle
in
that?
Local languages, native languages.
Value is also something that we actually were thinking of. Now, this, if we correlate it to elements of user experience design that I talked about earlier, Prashant, this is something that we defined the scope. This was something where we actually said, what are we building? Even though it is a product that happened, it's a redesigned product, we still said, these are the things that are available. These are the things that's got to be added. Like nice to have, so good to have, nice to have, and probably in a later phase. We actually defined the scope for what we are going to do, and this is probably the best example of defining that scope, right? Correlating that stuff. Then we go to the next stuff. We actually spoke to the users about a whole bunch of stuff. What are the drivers? What are the barriers about online grocery shopping itself? So drivers were avoid crowd and traffic. So we actually did only, at that point of time, they didn't have many cities. They had only 2 cities. They had Bombay and Bangalore. right? And both the cities, the people who we interviewed with, the biggest thing was that avoid crowded traffic and phenomenal convenience, right? I don't need to actually plow through traffic to reach this stuff. And biggest barrier was shipping costs. Like if only there was less shipping costs, I would have gotten it. Was something that we actually constantly heard from these guys about. The numbers that you see are the numbers that are references that are used by people. From 100, 65 people actually talked about shipping cost, right? So it's the references to number of people who mentioned this. And it's easy. So the next one was about finding products that are unavailable locally. And the pain was about waiting for specific delivery. The ease was fabulous, while the privacy and security I wasn't sure enough how private my information was. Promos and deals were constantly great, but I can't use, so that Sodexo and those passes that were happening, at that point of time, they didn't integrate it so well, so they can't use those coupons very well. So they have problems about using coupons. The saving on fuel was great. It was more expensive in some cases than like your next door neighbor grocery store, you know.
Okay.
And fantastic selection, better selection than your next door neighboring grocery store, but it's pretty confusing. This is before design, right? Like I don't know what the hell to do in this side. It takes less time, but there is no humanness. Like if I actually go and talk to somebody in a grocery store nearby, they will tell me, that this Bella works better for that sweet that you're making. That was a little more human, and there is no touch and feel in that kind of a stuff is another problem that we had. There is less work, so I don't need to like wake up, plan this stuff, weekend, drive through, mess about, make a list, go to the place, buy the thing. But unfortunately, there were damaged products that came in because everything had to be shipped. So it was not left to me. So these are the drivers and the barriers that we learned about the product itself, right? So it's how the product went about. We also wanted to understand the product forms.
Okay.
Like if you actually look at just coconut as a product form, it could be oil, powder, milk, cream, drink, flavored. There could be a whole bunch of other stuff. Just coconut could be coconut oil, coconut powder, coconut milk, coconut cream, coconut drink, and coconut flavor. How do you actually make people search right, discover the product right, and so on? Like mango as a product could be a flavoring, could be an ingredient, and could be the product itself, right? And how do you actually get around? And based on user intent, how do you actually make our breakdown of the information construct or the architecture very well, so that people can see this upfront, right? That is another thing that we did. We also did an audit of all the product elements that are there in the page. There were images of raw product, packaged product. There was packaging itself, which was shown, whether it is in a bag, a pouch, a basket, or a box, or a tray, or a bundle. There were deals and promos that were offered constantly. That was also indicated. There were prices, which were listed price, actual price, savings, and so on. That is indicated. So on the left-hand side, you will also see all these descriptors for every possible product that had to be indicated in some way or the other, right? That is something that we actually saw. We also saw methods in which they were packed on information that were given other than the standard stuff, like how do gift packs happen? How do tips and factoids come about a specific product itself? How do you indicate something is a new one or a new arrival? How do you indicate that availability date and notify when available and showing alternatives for something that is not there in stock? So it was an extensive audit and a redesign of, so all the pieces that you see here right now are the redesigned pieces, and some of them did not really exist in the old page, right? And when they all assembled together, this is how it looked, right? it actually had a navigation that was easy. Let me see whether I can zoom in to that stuff. Yeah, it had a navigation that was easy. There was a left hand side had a navigation. There was a recommendation pieces at the bottom. You clearly, quickly understood when the next delivery slot was up above. The basket was right side and available at all time. You can quickly jump to your previous order and pretty much order the entire same order again if you want to, or click off from there. You can use your old shopping lists, which are actually generated out of your orders, or you can clearly generate shopping list, and that was called as smart shopping. So there is an entire smart shop version that we created for it, and we actually defined methods in which you can actually photograph and represent products, which of course, since we had done this, it's been 5 years since we had done this, and it's all changed to different kind of photography. But the product photographs are pretty much the same that we had actually defined. Even the navigation, everything else is the same as what we had defined earlier, even now.
And even what about color? Like,
it changed a bit, but I think once you go to the inside page,
I'm talking like even for choosing colors and like considering, is this something to do with user research and design? I mean, development R&D. I mean, what I'm asking is,
actually we didn't do so much research on the color palette, but because you get very confusing responses when you review emotive stuff like color palette with users, because it's very subjective. It'll be stuff like I don't like, but we don't want that I don't like concept, right? We want stuff that is more like group ideation thought, right? So we presented some of the templates overall without really asking about the colors to a focus group. So we actually got stuff, references like it is very pleasing, it's easier on the eye. Then we didn't go on to like, do you like green? No, that will kind of complicate the issue. So then that's what we did. Then we also added some interesting stuff. Like one is, of course, spell correct, automatic spell correct, and the nearest possible spell. Like you type orag and no result found for orag, instead showing orange, and it immediately showed a whole bunch of orange stuff. And the best part is from the results themselves, you can add to the cart immediately. Right, so you actually, this feature is something that we suggested and is still available, and it is working very well for them, because the minute you see it on the lookup, not necessarily on the results, on the lookup itself, you can actually add to cart.
Directly add to the cart, instead of going to that product.
Instead of going to the product page, you don't need to see the product page. You actually see the line item and add to cart, unless you're a little more confused. And you also can jump directly to a whole bunch of stuff like popular brands. I want to actually jump to Tropicana and see orange juices in Tropicana. I don't want to see orange. I can do that from the right hand side, on the lookup itself, which is some more suggestions indicated, right? And that was a difficult thing for them to do over technologically, but they did talk about it. Also, we kind of rearranged the method in which you actually see the basket.
So we will tell them like this is the best way to do it, like for user, it's a comfortable way, and the tech team will do, like me, will write the backend code, right?
That's correct.
I mean,
that's correct. We actually
give
the
comfortableness of the user. Like if it is like that, user will be very comfortable to go like this and that.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. Fine,
so like there are two parts to it, right? One is that suggestive and ease for the user, and then there's the other part to it, which is like how can you lead the user on in an interesting way to other possible things that are available in the cart, in the shop itself, right? So that is what we did. Then we actually talked, I'm kind of speeding through a little bit because we are kind of tight on time.
Sure.
Then we actually went and designed how the cart is actually shown to the user. If you click on the cart, how does it actually show? Like each thing had a specific information piece that came out: name, picture, units that are added, total amount of money, and you saved so much, right? And a method in which you can delete it very easily out of the basket, where you click on the X and it goes out of the basket.
Yes.
right? And I can also go and see the entire basket before I check out. View basket and check out, click on it, and you'll be able to see the basket at any point of time,
Okay.
right? And then we actually indicated some more content for them. It's saying that, listen, it's probably a good idea to give content, and everything related to the content can be added to the basket in one shot at the bottom. Like if you actually are looking for easy Friday night cooking, grilled zucchini tacos vegetarian is something that is a good thing to kind of look at. If you like this, you know, you have all the ingredients at the bottom, select all, add to basket, you're done,
Yeah.
right? So
It's
you
like a
can add
feature.
selected to list, or you can add selected to basket, if you can see that.
Yeah. Like this is like
Second,
a feature, right? Like,
there's a feature. Actually, there's one more feature which is available right now, which is, I don't have an example for it as a screen right now, which is actually a good feature that worked out very well for them. Is also like, what did you spend your money on feature. Actually, if you go back to your thing, right, you go back to your profile, there it'll actually give you how you spent your money, like based on the
uh-huh.
categories that are there, how much
Uh-huh.
did you spend on what category,
Okay, okay.
which is an interesting thing because it is sticky. If you don't, if, for example, if you stop buying something from Big Basket, that data will be wrong.
Uh-huh.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So people want to keep shopping from Big Basket because the data will be intact and you will constantly know what you're spending money on,
Okay, okay.
right?
Yeah,
So
because
that is there. They have actually implemented it and it's available. I don't know whether it's still there. I haven't. I actually recently shopped in Big Basket, but I haven't um, I haven't checked whether that thing is available yet.
okay, okay. I have
Um,
to do that.
yeah, so that is the Big Basket case study for you. So you will see
Oh, nice.
examples of all the stuff that we talked about, right? And I'll actually go back to my keynote presentation, and we'll actually go and open this that stack, and you will kind of see the reference to this entire stack, right? You can see this, right,
Yes.
Prashant? My
Yes,
screen?
sir. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So I'm saying that so the idea of like user needs and product objectives, you saw that you saw the relevance of that. You defining scope, functional specifications, and content requirements in one sense. I mean, all the smaller pieces of information that needs to come into a stuff also is a part of the content requirement, right? We also talked about information architecture and interaction design, the larger thought of how is categories defined, how is subcategories defined, how is one keyword raising a bunch of things in the search result, and so on. We talked about navigation design, interface design, information design in reference to Big Basket. And we also looked at the visual design and the aspect of how typography and all the other stuff changed perception of the Big Basket site itself and how it's being used quite well now. So I'm happy to present the first case study, and
Thank
that
you.
is the case study that we have for today.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a ton. Thanks a ton, man.
Acadgild. Average is dead.